First announcement today is that I'm a grandfather for the first time. So I know I don't look old enough, but my boy had a son last night.
Nobody actually said that.
No. He had a son last night, so I'm very excited. I went to a conference earlier this week that was on IT, and of 8 presentations, 3, the IT didn't work. So it's pretty useful, pretty par for the course. I've got a pretty broad background in business. Let's see if I can. I've done lots of different things. I'm getting on a bit, but I've had a very varied career. I've been in marketing. I've been in HR. I've run businesses up to 200 million euros, and I've been a board director of 2 billion euro businesses. So my experience is of change, is of lots of different things. And I dip into education from time to time to help out. This may or may not work. It struck me that as we're all from the EU, this is the most simple explanation of EU debt that I've actually seen. So you can cheer when your own country comes up. You can cheer for. Now, can we get any noise on it?
I'll do it.
Yeah.
Is that picking that up?
Since the war,
Yeah.
been a bit quiet. Fair enough. Okay, Roger, your special subject tonight is the economies of the European community. Your time starts now. Best of luck.
Thank you.
How much does Greece owe, Roger?
$367 billion,
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
mostly to the other European economies.
Correct. How much does Ireland owe?
$865 billion,
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
other European economies mostly.
Correct. How much does Spain and Italy owe?
$1 trillion each,
Correct. Who to?
mainly France, Britain and Germany.
Correct. And how are Germany, France and Britain going, Roger?
Well, they're struggling a bit, aren't they?
Correct. Why?
Because they've lent all these vast amounts of money to other European economies that can't possibly pay them back.
Correct. So what are they going to do?
They're going to have to bail them out.
Correct. Where are they getting the money to do that, Roger?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
How much does Portugal owe?
Hang on a minute. What was the answer to that earlier question?
Just keep answering the questions, Roger. Where is Portugal going to get the money it owes to Germany if Germany can't get back the money that it lent to Italy?
Just a minute. What was the answer to the previous question? The question was, how can broke economies lend money to other broke economies who haven't got any money because they can't pay back the money the broke economy lent to the other broke economy and shouldn't have lent it to them in the first place because the broke economy can't pay it back?
You're wasting very valuable time, Roger. How much money does Spain owe to Italy?
$41 billion, but where are they going to get it?
Correct. What does Italy owe to Spain?
$27 billion, but they haven't got it. They're broke.
Correct. How can they pay each other if neither of them has any money?
They're going to get a bailout, aren't they?
Correct. And where's the money coming from for the bailout?
That's what I'm asking you.
Correct. Why are people selling the European currency and buying the US dollar?
Because the US economy is so much stronger than the European economy.
Correct. Why is that, Roger?
Because it's owned by China.
Correct. And very well done. And after that round, you've lost $1 million.
I've lost $1 million. I thought you said well done.
Yes, well done. You've only lost $1 million. That's an extraordinary performance, Roger.
I've only lost $1 million.
Very well done.
And that's quite good, is it?
Oh, it's excellent.
Sell everything immediately. Quickly.
Right. So it's easy now, isn't it? We all understand. But the situation is that things are pretty tough, aren't they? I've been involved in 3 recessions in the UK. This one's different. This one goes across boundaries. This really is affecting us. That's where we are in the West Midlands. We're in Birmingham, which statistically is seen as the youngest city in the UK in terms of average age. So there's a lot to be optimistic about. There's about 1 million people in Birmingham, but the broader area, West Midlands, has got about 5.5 million. Mainly small businesses now. We've lost a lot of big businesses where people went before to work under one roof. Those big places have gone. So we call them SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And they've largely started to take the place of those. Regional universities, and I've worked with all of them in different ways. Last but not least, University College Birmingham. I'm also involved with Newman. I was with Birmingham City University and the University of Birmingham last week. So we all collaborate and cooperate on different levels. They're all different, and there's a lesson straight away. Graduates in the Midlands, we're very good at training them, but we're not very good at keeping them in the West Midlands. I have 2 boys, both educated to degree level, but both left the Midlands to go to London. One's come back, he works for Jaguar Land Rover, and the other one is in the music industry now. So you have to accept that there is this drift towards where the jobs are. And it's quite a lesson, really. We need to keep that talent in the Midlands to help business grow. So, and this is no different from your countries. Not many graduates are employed in smaller private businesses, and there was a bit of a clue there. And the problem is that employers need experience. Graduates haven't necessarily got experience, and you go round and round and round. And then you've still got students graduating. So the problem is getting worse. So how do we find jobs? This handsome lad over here is my second boy. By the way, he did a sports degree. So careers services in universities are pretty different. Usually there's a central service. Occasionally there's extra grant funding available. And the interesting thing to me is that students don't latch on very early. They're quite late in deciding what they want to do. And that's the pattern. From A-level, they don't know which A-levels to do, they don't know which degree to do, and then, oh, I'm in my 3rd year, I might have to think about getting a job. And so it's all a bit late. And the bigger the university, the more likely it is to cooperate across Europe. But nevertheless, they're quite inward-looking in the way they manage these things. This is a classic example of a success that was thrown away by a change of government. And it was interesting because this business of needing experience can be tackled by putting a graduate into a business. We call them internships. They've been around a long time. And so we had an idea to really push and get experience of work. I don't call it work experience. That's too short. Experience of work can be volunteering, can be all sorts of things. And so we set up this arrangement where we would catapult graduates in to a business and see how they got on. Minimal administration. Businesses are too busy to mess about with academic timetables. We haven't got time. We're trying to run a business. We're trying to survive. And so we made sure that whatever we did was very, very simple. 2 databases, 2 customers, businesses and students. and we just matched, a bit like a dating agency. This one wants, here I am, sort of thing. So that's the only bit of paper we used, one sheet of paper to explain the scheme to employers, because they haven't got time. If this pops into your inbox and it's 10 pages long, you're not likely to read it. So the communication associated with it was very important. These are the partners, all the universities, all the employer organisations, Institute of Directors, CBI, engineering employers and so on. And this is gone. That was the government-funded body that helped us, supported us in this process. Headline results. We had 1,152 employer inquiries, which was phenomenal, because these companies had never employed a graduate before. Small businesses up to 5, 6 people. And when you have a look at this, 150 successful job outcomes. 150 people got jobs where jobs didn't exist before, because they suddenly got experience of work. And the businesses were able to have a look at the students, the graduates, and say, yeah, they're good. We'll offer them a job. So 70% of the roles created were new, 75% said they'd have a go again. And that is one way of getting over this business of needing experience. And the discipline from a student's point of view of getting up, going into work, contributing in a team is very, very important. And it worked. So what happened? We changed the government and they threw it all away. But the learning that we got from it is still very, very relevant. Now, I'm a businessman. I'm a turnaround specialist. So I haven't got time to mess about. I'm not interested in huge reports and thinking about things for a long time. So Pareto was an inspiration. Zip and Durant. Those were the sorts of things that are very, very important. I ended up talking to some people in Italy, in Milan, and I was very pleased to be able to talk to them about their man who'd inspired us, Mr. Italy over here, who'd inspired us to do it. So the outcomes, 4 out of 12 universities provided the majority of the students. 4 out of 26 business organisations. Now, when we started, all of the universities said they were interested. It was pretty obvious that they were not interested enough to put some effort in. So we focused on the good ones, the ones that wanted to play the game we were playing. So bear that in mind. So collaboration lessons from that were perfection is impossible. Don't even try to get everything right. 90% might be okay. Customers, graduates and businesses. Not everyone else who playing their little games. And it's work with the willing is the phrase. Don't have huge rules. Throw these people together and see what comes out. And tell everyone. Simple language as well. The point that Richard made earlier on about communication keeps coming up. So, future challenges in this whole area. More jobs. Could be more public sector cuts that affect us. And it's interesting. Stronger links between universities and employers. It's a very difficult area because there's an industry that's built up where there are job titles in universities that are about employer engagement, Now, businesses see that as people from universities walking up to them and saying, give us some money. And there's got to be a two-way, there's got to be something in it for the businesses. There's got to be a way of both winning. Because if as a university, you go to a business and say, just give me some money, I'll just carry on running my business. It's tough enough anyway. But if there is something both ways, it'll help. And one of the things I really believe in is mentoring. We actually mentor some university undergraduates on business courses, and we'll be doing the same pretty shortly with the UCB. We catch them in the third year, and we have businessmen who are members of the Institute of Directors. This year I had 3, and we help them in their final year's work, and starting to think about the world of work that's facing them. So employability we talk about, and employability has got dropped off our agendas from the political scene. Lots of talk, but they've all dropped employability, and it's more important than ever for us in business. So, there's my boy. That was one of my slides from Milan. But let's just think about the situation we're faced with. Money is very tight. Massive change when you're involved in cost cutting will demoralize workforces. And you start then to look inwardly. And some of the points that Richard talked about, you focus on yourself. You forget about your customers. You just get disconnected from customers. You can't grow anymore, so you're back into more cost cutting. That is the road to nowhere. So, personal lessons. I've led change in all sorts of different situations, integrating acquisitions, turnarounds in different sectors. I've run manufacturing businesses. I've had 300 retail stores, all as turnarounds. These are the things. If you don't plan, you've had it. So planning is very important. Be very wary about involving people who are interested in the status quo. If you've got people that aren't interested, aren't committed to allowing you to change, it'll be tough. Avoid committees. If you've got a room full of people to make decisions, you won't make decisions well enough, quickly enough to make a difference. Use a change model, and I'll show you another one in a minute. You're in the academic world. Don't invent another one. There are hundreds of them out there, and the reality is that day to day, you use bits of these models. You mix and match from one model to another. So if you're pushed by the academics to actually invent another one that is exclusive to your organisation, don't. Because that's not what it's about. This is about action. So utopia is this place where everything is perfect. Doesn't exist really. Focus, communicate well, keep going, and have some fun. Life shouldn't be that serious, but it is. But get some people around you that are like-minded. Here's one that I've used on a number of occasions, Cotter. The interesting thing there is you have to create a sense of urgency. If you haven't got that sense of urgency, things will just plod on. Things won't move quickly enough. Form a powerful coalition. Have you got the right people around you that can influence and make change happen? One of the things about change is that you have to do things differently. You have to behave differently to effect change properly. If you just say, right, we're all going to change, but don't do anything differently, carry on doing exactly what you've done before, nothing will happen. So that's pretty good. Short-term wins, quite important. Consultants call it low-hanging fruit, but that's a decent approach. That's a decent model. And then anchor the changes in the new culture. And if you find yourself on a change program, but you're not doing things differently, rethink and start again. I also use Kepner-Trigo. I don't know if anyone's come across that. A couple of American consultants. They have a rational process. Their original book was called The Rational Manager. It gives you the discipline to stop and think about where you are and have a look at the situation you've got. And decision making is far more rational, far more considered using one of these models. And again, you don't have to use every little bit of it, but what you have to do is slow down, think about it, so that you don't make the wrong decisions at the start. Some time ago, the only study I've come across in the UK about management decision making was that the average manager in the UK reckons that they get things right first time just 30% of the time. Now that means that 70% they're having to second guess and then second guess again. So lots of people are too quick to rush to judgments. And if a doctor did that, we'd be in a bit of trouble, wouldn't we? So lots affecting change in our society. This is just the UK's list. Every country's got its problems. The worst one at the bottom was that Birmingham City, my football team, were relegated. And it really does affect morale. It affects all sorts of things. But that's what we're facing. You can't even go to a bank and trust it to be a bank, because suddenly they're casinos. And so the world we're in is changing rapidly. Now, one or two tips. I reckon a dose of skepticism is pretty good. So I'm arguing that question things. Don't just take things for granted. There's one. He's in the electric chair, and if those windmills don't turn, he might survive. Don't believe everything you read. Everything in our press in the UK is so short term, it's amazing. Here we are, that's one of our newspapers, 29th of August. I read that just as I was about to have a glass of wine. Oh dear, it's going to kill me. A week later, get stuck in. It's good for you in exactly the same newspaper. Midlands Insider, this is online in the Midlands, and said, boom time for West Midlands manufacturers. Now, one of their rivals is called the Business Desk. Same day, declines in manufacturing. So who do you believe? You know, if you respond to the first thing you see, you'll be all over the place. And Jones is our expert in how to panic. And we all know Mr. Jones in our various organisations. And we've had all of these scares. And the one that gets me going is global warming. Don't start me off about global warming. There hasn't been any appreciable increase in temperatures since the mid-90s. another 3 years and we'll have gone 20 years without the catastrophes that have been flagged up. So just question, that's all I'm saying. And it's very important in terms of change that you do question. So what should we do as leaders? You need to take some time out to reflect on your position. You can't do this in the middle of your day job. And you don't need weeks or months to do it, but you do need to, probably with your top team, analyse the position. And you focus on leadership. This often lets change down. The implementation of change is so important, as is the planning. And lots of organisations think they've got there once they've got a plan. Doesn't work that way. That's utopia again. Now, being positive, if you have a look at 30 years ago, none of that lot existed. And you think of the opportunities that have come out of those things. And global warming was global cooling in the 70s. And we were going to have exactly the same sort of issues. Couldn't grow enough food, and so on and so forth. Now, all of that has been over the last 30 years. Arguably, the pace of change will quicken up. So there will be opportunities. But we did have the Rolling Stones, and they're looking a bit rough now, aren't they? So don't be complacent. And today's work in today's ways is quickly outdated. Just because you do it, it's not necessarily right, is it? And equipment's not the best because you own it. You're stuck with it. So just question. New success factors. Arguably, speed is important. So don't hang around. Flexibility, collaboration, and above all, innovation. So leadership or management is a question I often pose to organisations. Leaders are concerned with doing the right things, and managers are concerned with doing things right. Only a slight difference, but it's very important. You must take on a leadership role at all levels in organisations and do the right things. So are you a sheep or are you a shepherd, is the question. I like that. The best way to have a good idea is to have lots of ideas. Linus Pauling, he only won 2 Nobel Prizes. But you've got to have organisations that allow people to come up with new ideas. So lots of organisations are besotted by efficiency. Now I'd argue that effectiveness is probably more important, because otherwise you carry on doing the same things. I went into a manufacturing business, and we'd got factories where everything was very, very good. They were very good at what they did. But I found I'd got product that nobody wanted to buy, but we made it beautifully. And I got thousands and thousands of products that people didn't want. So I look for effectiveness, not necessarily efficiency. Factory efficiencies, yeah, okay, but didn't give me what I wanted in that business. Communication is so difficult unless you really spend lots of time on it. Think about your targets, and you've got to work on it. Insist on one-pagers. Someone told me donkeys years ago that if an IT man comes to you with a thick brochure and a suggestion. Keep sending it back until he can come back with one page. What's it going to do for your organisation? You're not interested in great reports, but what's it going to do? So send it back. Now, pay attention to detail as well. You'll be surprised at the amount of mistakes that are made. Now, the World Cup was in South Africa a couple of years ago. Now that appeared online, and that is South America. So it's near, isn't it? But it's that sort of gap, that credibility gap, that doesn't help when you're in change mode. So, tip on people. People do business with people. It's not an organisation working with an organisation. It's the people. And it's so important. Get the best people you can. And in turnarounds and businesses that have gone bad, it's often the case that you don't need as many of everything. And it's surprising what you don't need. And lots of people don't trust their colleagues. If they're around the table, give them a chance to contribute. Committees. I haven't got much time for committees. I was once a chairman of a board that had 18 directors and it only had 4 workers. 18 directors, 4 employees. What a waste of time and effort and communication. So be careful about deciding that you'll have a committee or you'll have another meeting to do these things. Throw some of those things out. So we'll have a quiz in a minute. People in committees agree on decisions which as individuals they know are stupid. Right? Have you ever come out of a meeting, a board meeting, and said to a colleague, "What was that about?" "Well, I don't agree with that." Yeah? And then somebody else comes out and says, "I don't agree with that." Now, this has been around for years. That's human nature. So understand it, and in change situations, try and manage it. Not saying that everybody needs to agree, but the golden rule that comes out of that is that once you've made a decision, everyone in your team must support that position. Because otherwise, you're constantly fighting for something that's already agreed. So it's very, very important. This guy, Lloyd George, was Prime Minister in this country about 100 years ago, and he said, "Don't be afraid to have a real go if you need to." No one ever crossed a chasm in tiny steps. So if there is a big issue that's flagged up, don't be afraid to go for it. And there's a final tip for some leaders. Keep your fears to yourself, but share your inspiration and enthusiasm with others. There's nothing worse than a leader who's down there with the dead men. That is very important. And if all else fails, go fishing. And go fishing again. Now that fish is actually twice as heavy as my grandson. So has anybody got any questions?
Even about the fish.
Even about the fish?
If you look close at that picture, there's a Sainsbury's just behind and a fish tank.
So do you recognise some of the things I've said about change? Do you recognise the blocks? Now, sometimes they're colleagues, sometimes They're parts of an organisation. I had a situation once where there was an acquisition, and we took in the managing director of the acquisition, and he was a pain for 18 months. I told the chairman, we've got to get rid of him. 18 months he stayed, and he slowed down the process of integration of the business for 18 months because he just wasn't his game, he didn't want to play. I would have personally have shot him on day 3. I'd have given him 3 days. But those sorts of things in change situations are very, very important. And recognising those barriers and those blocks is pretty key to moving on. Anybody got any other questions?
Can you touch a bit the topic of change resistance? Have you ever had the chance to experience change resistance on say, just like members or colleagues? How did you deal with it?
It's an interesting question. It happens every time. And people will say, I'm very comfortable with change. No one says, I don't like this, because everybody thinks they have to say uncomfortable. Now, the thing to do is to involve people in change and involve people in doing things differently. It's back to my earlier point. If you don't behave differently, the organisation won't change. And you do have to face up to the fact that you may have to get rid of people. We have all sorts of euphemisms for getting rid of people, as you probably do in your own country. My favourite is the sponsored walk. The marathon. They all run for sponsors. Well, you give someone a cheque and tell him to go away. That's the sponsored walk. But you do have to face it, and face it early. Some people are subtle. They'll do it from the background. Some people are, resistant up front. But it's present in every change programme I've ever been involved in. But you have to tackle it early. Tackle it in different ways. Otherwise, the time will just go on and on and on. And you'll have another 3 meetings about it, and people will complain about that person another 3 or 4 times. And if they can't change themselves in a change environment, sorry, shoot them. Any other points? Okay, well,
Thanks, John.
Good to meet you. I'm going fishing.
Catch John this afternoon on the fishing. But John, I think John's reminded us of an important point there, hasn't he? We mentioned process, we talk about systems a lot, what have you, but John broke out some of what it's all about, really, which is people. Which is why we're here and why you've all travelled around Europe to be with us. It's about people by people and people influence other people and so on. So, time for a break. Tea, coffee,